Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us for our Knowledge Bites session. This is actually session number 5, excuse me, not session number 4. But we have Senator White and Representative Keefe here today to talk to us about engaging with your state delegation. So the goal of these webinar series are to provide high-level introduction to economic and workforce development programs, resources, and tools. In this case, your state delegation are your resources. At the end of each session, information is provided on where the participants can get more in-depth assistance utilizing this resource. So I'll have Senator White and Representative Keefe provide you with their contact information. So the structure of this webinar series, it is a 20-minute presentation. We'll hear from both of our presenters. They'll talk a little bit about what they do, and then talk about the engagement with our constituents, and then we'll have 10 minutes for question and answer. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat function. And also, we are recording this, and it will be archived on the website that you see on your screen. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And whenever you are ready, take it away.
Okay, I think that's my cue. Sarah, thank you. Senator White graciously allowed me to go first, so I'll kick it off. So my name is Brian Keefe. I live in Manchester, Vermont, so I represent the Bennington 4 district. It's a 2-person district, so Cynthia Browning is my seatmate. I'm new. I was first elected this last year. So I feel like I'm kind of gone through a 1-year cycle with the campaign and the legislative session and now the off-season, so to speak. And as far as, briefly on my background, I have some legislative experience. I worked for Senator Jeffords for about 15 years in Washington and in Vermont. So that got me familiar with federal legislative and regulatory stuff. And then I mainly followed energy and environment issues for Senator Jeffords. And then I worked for Central Vermont Public Service for about 6 years until it was sold to Green Mountain Power. I was Vice President of Government and Public Affairs, which brought me in the State House and got me closer to some of the state issues, especially, again, energy and environment. I decided to run last year because I'm a Republican. I'm a Phil Scott supporter. I was hoping he would win, and I thought maybe I could be up there and help support him. Like a lot of other legislators, and frankly a lot of people, I've been active in my community from Little League coaching to Planning Commission chair to food cupboard. So I've been involved, and I find that a majority of legislators are involved in that way too. So that brings you pretty close to what's going on in your town. And so I decided to run last year in a competitive race, and I won. And so I've been through my first session, and it was fun. It was enjoyable, and I thought productive. So turning to how to connect with your legislators, I will kind of go through that cycle. So during a campaign, I'm trying to get out there as much as I can, but if I'm not finding you, then you definitely should find me, because that's a good time to connect with your legislators and see what they think about issues that are important to you. As the session rolls in, and once you are a legislator, I get calls and emails from constituents who may have a problem or a legislative suggestion, and I try to be pretty responsive, and I think most legislators do, because, frankly, people that call are the ones that are either going to or not going to vote for you next time. And I get some good, so I get an email from a person recently about a child custody issue, and I was able to help guide her to the right people to get the right information. Likewise, at the beginning of last session, I got an email from a person who was caught in the so-called benefit cliff. I won't get into the detail of what it means, but it meant a lot to her, and that encouraged me to introduce a bill that was later signed into law in the first session, and I felt pretty good about that. And during the session, a good way to contact people is through the Sergeant-at-Arms. I don't have that 800 number here in front of me, but the way that works is if you call that 800 number, it goes to the Sergeant-at-Arms desk, and they will get a note to your legislator within 15 or 20 minutes. And that can be pretty message if you're sitting there ready to vote and you get a note from somebody you know and they have an opinion on it. It can either be very encouraging or sometimes kind of make you think sometimes. So through the Sergeant-at-Arms during the session is an excellent way to contact people. And then I'll just say a couple more things and turn it over to Senator White. But during the off-season is a great time to introduce a legislator. Speaking for myself, I like getting invitations from hospitals, counseling services, child care providers, businesses, interest groups, to sit down during the off-season to talk about issues and in a broader sense and get to know people. Off-season can be a very productive time. During the session, it gets kind of busy. So during the off-season can be a very, very important time. And if you are an organization or a business, a lot of times it's good to reach out to your delegation even a little bit beyond the boundaries. I'm way over in Manchester, Senator White's there in Brattleboro. So those are good ways to, those are just some of the ways to get in touch with people during the different cycles of the election and legislative year. So with that, I'll stop and turn it over to Jeanette. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. I think I'm all set. So I'm Jeanette White and I live in Putney. I represent Windham County. Actually, it's Windham Senate District because it isn't just the county. It's Windham County less Wilmington, which belongs to the Bennington Senate District, and Londonderry, which now belongs to the Windsor Senate District. We have to do a little shifting around every 10 years because of the census changes. So I've been in the Senate for, this is my 8th term, so I've been there for 15 years. I had no idea that I would be there that long. I was thinking, you know, 5, 6 years, I don't know. I was on the Putney Select Board for many years before that, so I kind of got introduced into the policy-making world, and I love it. So in the Senate, we serve on 2 different committees. I serve in the morning on the Judiciary Committee, and in the afternoon, I chair Senate Government Operations. And that's a weird kind of committee because it deals with the structure of government, law enforcement, open meeting laws, public records, elections, all of that stuff, municipal issues, and then anything else we decide we want to deal with. So kind of how to engage with legislators, I think that there's many, many ways. As Brian said, there are groups, interest groups that have us come to put on meetings for us, to come and hear the issues that they're concerned about and how we can help them, and to tell us more about what they're doing. There's also, I've found that one of the ways of contacting your legislators that is really important is the grocery store. If I'm in a hurry, I never do groceries. I send my husband to do groceries because inevitably at least 5 or 6 people will stop you in the grocery store and say, look, I have a problem with this, or you know that piece of legislation that you're dealing with, could you look at these issues around it? So there's many, many ways to do it personally and through groups. And we do respond to people. As Brian said, there are times when there are personal issues that people have, and we respond to those. My goal in being a legislator is to try to make the systems work effectively so that people don't have to use their personal contacts. The systems should work for everybody, whether they have that personal contact or not. So most of the time when somebody contacts us with an idea, we'll put that forward, contact our legislative council. They're the stable of attorneys that write our legislation for us. and we'll contact them and give them the idea, sometimes have them talk directly to the constituent or the group to get all the ideas down. Now, sometimes I've been asked to introduce pieces of legislation that I didn't really like. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I wouldn't have voted for it, but a constituent was very concerned about it. So sometimes you'll see on the sponsor list or the line for legislation, in parentheses behind the sponsor's name, it will say by request. And that usually means that the person that introduced it did it at the request of a constituent, but doesn't really support the idea. So I'm going to talk about kind of a couple examples of things that where constituents have talked to me about things. Some of them are very, very simple. We had a group in West Brattleboro that wanted to put up a sign that said, "Welcome to West Brattleboro." And I don't know if you know how Brattleboro is situated, but Brattleboro is on one side of 91, and then West Brattleboro is kind of on the other side of 91. And so they're the same town, but they seem kind of separate, and they have separate identities. So they wanted to put up a sign that said, "Welcome to West Brattleboro." Our V-Trans people had a fit because you can't put up signs. We have signs that sign laws. So what I did is introduce a piece of legislation, and it went to the Transportation Committee that just added census-designated areas so that they can put up signs. And everybody has one in their town. It's well, not everybody. I think there are 40 of them in the state. So West Brattleboro is one. Algiers, for example, is this little community in Guilford, and I'm sure, Brian, I'm sure you have some in your areas. They're known by a name, but they're not really a separate town. So that was a very simple thing that somebody asked me to do, and we got it done. Slightly marked, but sometimes they're very complicated. And I ran into a constituent one day who had real concerns about our alimony laws in the state. We haven't changed our alimony laws since the 50s, and the world has changed a lot since then. But yet our alimony laws were way out of touch. So he asked me to look at that. So we introduced a piece of legislation 2 years ago that would set up a study committee to look at it. The House didn't pass it. We introduced it again this year, and we did get it passed. So now there's a study committee looking at all of our alimony, or they're called, I guess, spousal maintenance laws. And so when we go back in January, we'll have a recommendation from that group about what we should do about our alimony laws. So there are many times when things end up ending up in legislation. Sometimes it's an easy fix, sometimes it's really complicated. I'll tell you that a couple things. We do get tons of emails, as Brian said, during the session. And remember that we have no staff. So when we get all those emails, it's up to us to answer them, and the phone calls and the letters. And that's okay, except that sometimes it takes time. During a legislative session when we have a particularly heavy bill, I might get 150 or 200 emails every day on different issues. And it's hard to answer all those by evening. So just everybody should bear with and know that at some point, maybe in July or August, you'll get an answer to your March email, but we do read them. I'll tell you I believe the least effective way to communicate with legislators is through form emails, where you get from an advocacy group, you get an email and it says, click on here and this will go to your legislators. Because there's no personal information there. Why do you oppose it? Why do you support it? What is the issue? And I get things from referring to federal legislation, Florida legislation, California legislation, urging me to vote for or against something. So that's the least effective way of communicating. The Sergeant at Arms number is 1-800-322-5616. And you can find that out on the legislative website. Our information is all on the legislative website. That's probably the easiest thing than trying to write it down from here. But we have our home phone numbers are on there, and our legislative email addresses are on there. So with that, I don't know if there are any questions or if you want to hear something more.
Brian, do you have anything to add to what she said?
No, I thought that was very good, especially the last point. I'll reinforce that as far as getting form letters or something that's been sort of contrived. Yeah, I also don't respond well to letters that are sort of threatening, for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you don't vote this way, I'll make sure that you don't get elected and stuff. It's not very effective for me personally.
And Brian, I think that one of the things that we all need to remember is that you have a 2-member district, so I think your population is about 9,000. We have Windham, the Senate districts are about, our district is a 2-member district. Senator Balance is the other senator from Windham district, and so our population is about 45,000. It's not a popularity contest. So if we get, and those groups aren't monoliths. So when somebody says you're not representing your constituents because you didn't vote the way I wanted you to vote, there's a lot of other constituents out there that we each have. So it isn't, we have to balance all of that and weigh them.
Yeah, and I'll just add to I agree with that. I lost my thought there, but as a legislator, you kind of vote. You have to go with your conscience. You have to go with what's right, and you never match up perfectly politically with any other person. I don't care how close you are politically with someone, and there'll be that one issue that you'll diverge. So I think most voters recognize that there's always going to be a divergent of opinion, and you cannot satisfy every single constituent. And if you try to do that as a legislator through your votes, you will you'll lose track of your own center of gravity.
Yeah, I think that's important to remember that I don't think this is true with Vermont legislators, but oftentimes people try to tell people what they want to hear, and that's really not the way we should be doing this. We're up there representing constituents, and the best thing to do for Vermont, we're trying to do the best. I have found that Republican, Democrat, progressive, independent, whatever, that everybody up there is there trying to make the best decisions for Vermont, and I think we work really well together. And so as a constituent, you should feel free to contact anybody and think that they will bring your issue to the legislature.
So if your constituents had to choose one form of communication, the most effective form of communication, say they have a time-sensitive issue that they want to get in touch with you about, what is the form of communication that you respond to most quickly? Jeanette?
I would say that it's probably a telephone call and through the Sergeant at Arms offices, because remember, we don't have any offices, so the Sergeant at Arms office delivers the messages to us. But if it is something that really needs responding to right away, there needs to be that message on the message, because we call them pink slips. So we get these little messages in the mail, while you were out, your phone message is, and we get hundreds of those every day. So there needs to be something there that calls our attention to it as a timely manner.
Okay. Brian?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. During the session, Sergeant at Arms with that level of urgency is a great way. You know, my number, I still have a landline at home, and my number's in the phone book, so people call me there. One thing to remember, though, different legislators are different, but I don't check my legislative email every day during the summer. I pretty much, but I can't guarantee that. So if there's urgency, yeah, phone call is the best way. Meanwhile, if there's a lot of detail and background and names that you want to convey and phone numbers and process and things like that, an email is very helpful so that you know, when I receive it or a legislator receives it, they know they have a better understanding of the full breadth of the problem.
And you know, there has been some discussion about legislative and public officials' emails about whether they're public record or not. Our legislative counsel is very clear that if it's between a constituent and a legislator, it is not a public record. So people can feel free to send information that they might not want distributed widely.
Great. If there's anything else you guys want to add, I would also like you guys to spell out your email and your phone number if you could, just so people have that. And I will also put it up on the website that we archive these videos at. But it's always nice just to have that information in the videos.
Okay, my phone number is in the phone book in Putney. It's 387-4379. And the legislative email is jwhite@leg.state.vt.us. And if people have a hard time finding that anywhere, going to the legislative email or the legislative website is a really helpful and easy to use website.
Great. And Brian?
Yeah, so I agree with that. There's a ton of information on the legislative website, including numbers and bios of every legislator, 150 House members, 30 Senate members, and then a lot of staff. My email is, legislative email, it's the same format as Senator White's. It's bkeefe, B-K-E-E-F-E, @ledge.state.vt.us. And my home phone is 802-362-7283. And yeah, it's you know, part of this job is a year-round job. We're only in session 4 months, but I'm learning. I learned pretty soon that people call a lot or contact me a lot, and which is fine. That's part of the job, and that's how I'm still new at this, and it helps me learn how the systems work. And as Senator White said earlier today, ideally the systems work without prodding or nudging, but no system really works that way, and that your car doesn't work that way as much as you want it to, or sometimes your family doesn't always go prodding. Sometimes your own self, myself included, needs a little prodding or nudging. So those contacts, those emails, they help us understand how the system works, and ideally we can, and I think Jeanette touched on this earlier as well, we can try to help make that system better. So and I know Senator White feels the same. I appreciate hearing from people. I like getting the invitations to different events, and so keep those cards and letters coming. Thank you.
And oftentimes we might have if there's the personal problems like Brian was talking about with people who needed some help with dealing with the system, we have some contacts that people may not have, and we can use those contacts, but we can't solve the problems, but we can put people in touch with someone who can help them solve the problems.
Great. Well, this was super informative. If you guys just hang out 1 second, I'm gonna finish up here. All right, so just as a heads up, our next 2 webinar sessions are on September 12th John Bates from the Vermont Manufacturing Extension Center will be with us, talking about structured problem solving. And then on September 26th, we'll have Gary Holloway from the Vermont Department of Housing and Community Development, and he'll be talking about utilizing the Vermont Downtown Designation or Village Designation Program to leverage fundings and benefits. And again, these sessions are archived at that website you see on your screen. And also, we're always open to suggestions for webinar topics, so please contact me at the email you see or the phone number. We would love to entertain your ideas about programs, tools, or resources that you want to know more about, and I can reach out to the experts in those areas and see if they want to put on a webinar session. So thank you again to Senator White and to Representative Keefe, and I think we'll sign off here.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, guys.
Bye,
Have
Jeanette.
a good day.
Bye.
Bye.